This is not a prediction, it's a diagnosis. America isn't about to collapse. The collapse has already started, we're just too distracted to notice. Our national debt is rising by $1 trillion every 100 days. 60% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. We have 750 military bases, but can't keep the lights on in Texas. Our birth rate is lower than it was in the Great Depression. 1 in 5 homes have 0 people working. The government, the banks, the grid, it's all quietly breaking. By the time you feel it, it'll be too late to escape it. So if you're still asking, is America in decline? The real question is, how long until the empire is just a memory? You want to know how civilizations collapse? It's not with war or even debt. It's when the next generation never shows up. And in 2025, the United States is facing a fertility crisis so steep, it makes the Great Depression look like a baby boom. The replacement level, the number of births per woman needed to keep a population stable, is 2.1. America's current number, 1.6. That's lower than 1930s America, lower than post-war Europe. We are now on par with countries that are literally shrinking into economic irrelevance. Japan, 1.3, South Korea, a suicidal 0.72, and we're heading down that same slope, fast. But this isn't just about population, it's about productivity, pensions, and power. Fewer kids today means fewer workers tomorrow. That means fewer taxpayers to fund Social Security, fewer soldiers to fill the military, and fewer entrepreneurs to drive the next industrial wave. And don't believe the immigration will solve it myth. The birth rate for immigrants also collapses within 1 generation. By the time their kids are old enough to matter economically, they're having just as few children as everyone else. There is no rescue squad. The demographic cliff is real, it's steep, and it's accelerating. Every empire in history, from Rome to the Ottomans, began their final descent when birth rates fell and old age took over. You want to know how power ends? It doesn't explode, it withers, quietly, predictably. A graying nation with too few workers, too many dependents, and no fiscal way out. And here's the killer stat. By 2034, for the first time ever, there will be more Americans over 65 than under 18. That has never happened in the history of this country. Not during the Civil War. Not during the Dust Bowl. Never. Until now. And once that demographic inversion locks in, you don't get a second chance. You can't invent a generation of 20-year-olds out of thin air. Fertility collapse is like time travel. By the time you realize what happened, you're 30 years too late to fix it. America isn't just getting older, it's running out of young people. And if we cross this tipping point without course correction, there is no economic model, no tax scheme, no immigration policy that can save us. We're staring down the barrel of a slow-motion extinction, and no one's even talking about it. Everyone's been told the same story for decades. The US dollar is untouchable, the global reserve currency, the safest asset on Earth. But what happens when the weapon becomes a boomerang? In 2022, when the United States froze $300 billion of Russia's foreign currency reserves overnight, something broke. Not just in Moscow, but in Beijing, Riyadh, Brasilia, New Delhi, places where central banks suddenly realized, if the US doesn't like your politics, your money can disappear. Just like that. And the message was loud and clear. The dollar is no longer neutral, it's a political tool. That's when the shift began. Quietly, behind the scenes, countries started de-dollarizing. China and Russia now settle most of their oil and gas trade in yuan and rubles. Brazil and Argentina agreed to use a new currency for bilateral trade. Saudi Arabia, our old petrodollar ally, is now accepting yuan for oil. Even France just settled a gas trade with China in yuan. That never used to happen. Central banks are watching, and they're not stupid. The US debt is now over $34 trillion. Our interest payments are over $1 trillion annually. And what do? Print more money to pay off old debts. Why would any country keep its savings in a currency backed by nothing, issued by a government that treats debt like candy? That's why global gold purchases are now at record highs. Over 1 in 200 tons bought by central banks in 2023 alone, the most ever recorded. This is how nations hedge against collapse. They're preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer king, and once the shift gains momentum, it becomes a stampede. Remember, 80% of all global trade is still denominated in dollars. If even 10% of that moves to other currencies, you get a tsunami of dollars flooding back to US shores, triggering hyperinflation, soaring interest rates, and capital flight. That's how reserve currencies die, not in silence, but in a rush for the exits. And here's the part no one wants to admit. We did this to ourselves. We weaponized the dollar to punish our enemies, and now our friends are building lifeboats. The financial system that gave America its global power is quietly unraveling. And we're standing here pretending it's still 1995. Let's get one thing straight. If you can't generate, transmit, and store electricity at scale, you're not a superpower. You're a footnote. And America? We're inching toward blackouts like it's a national hobby. In the summer of 2023, 70% of the US was under a grid failure warning. Texas, the energy capital of the Western world, almost went dark twice because a few clouds covered solar panels. California was asking people to charge EVs only during non-peak hours. And the Northeast? One ice storm away from medieval living conditions? But this isn't just weather, it's policy. Between 2012 and 2023, the US prematurely shut down over 20% of its coal-fired power plants. Nuclear, our cleanest and most reliable baseload energy, we're shutting those down too. Meanwhile, our bet on solar and wind, while ideal in theory, is failing in practice. Grid reliability is down 30% since 2010, according to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. Even worse, America's power grid was designed in the 1960s. Transformers are 40-plus years old, and 70% of our transmission lines are at the end of their lifespan. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our electric grid a C-, and that's being generous. And let's talk batteries, the holy grail of green energy. Do you know who dominates 95% of global lithium processing? China. So even if we wanted to shift fully electric tomorrow, Beijing could pull the plug, and they will. But this goes deeper than power lines. Infrastructure is the circulatory system of empire. If you can't keep the lights on, the servers running, the factories operating, you lose everything. Industry, military command, communication, trust. Power outages in 2025 are a geopolitical red flag. They tell the world, we can't maintain the basics. The Pentagon literally warned in 2024 that persistent power instability could compromise homeland readiness. This isn't hypothetical. It's happening now. And you better believe our adversaries are watching. A superpower doesn't run on hope. It runs on watts. And right now, America is bleeding energy, hemorrhaging reliability, and coasting on an aging grid one hot summer away from collapse. When the lights go out in a country that used to light the world, that's not just a blackout. That's a warning flare. We're not in control anymore. There was a time when America built the impossible. The Hoover Dam, the interstate highway system, the Apollo missions. We dreamed big, built bigger, and finished fast. Now, the United States is incapable of building anything on time, on budget, or at scale. In 2022, California's infamous high-speed rail, announced in 2008, was already 15 years behind schedule, $100 billion over budget, and still hadn't connected a single major city. In Boston, the Green Line extension cost $2.3 billion for just 4.7 miles. That's $490 million per mile, making it more expensive than tunneling under Manhattan. Meanwhile, France and China are laying high-speed rail like it's sidewalk chalk. But it's not just trains. Airports, power plants, bridges, tunnels. We've bureaucratized ourselves into paralysis. The Permitting Reform Act was meant to streamline construction. Instead, it buried projects in 7 to 10 years of environmental review, litigation, and public comment. The average infrastructure project now takes 17 years to go from proposal to completion. And while America's engineers file paperwork, China just built an entire city from scratch in 1/5 that time. You want to know if a country is in decline? Ask this: can it build fast? Can it build strong? Can it build at all? America used to be a nation of builders. Today we're a nation of consultants. Endless studies, risk assessments, advisory panels, no action, no steel in the ground. Even our military construction is stalling. The U.S. Navy wanted 500 ships by 2045. Instead, it's shrinking. The last major new shipyard built in this country, over 35 years ago. China's building them every year. And here's the dangerous part. When a nation can no longer build, it loses control of the future. Housing collapses, transportation stagnates, energy fails, supply chains die, people leave, and the cost of doing anything skyrockets. We are being priced out of our own civilization. The U.S. has become so consumed by red tape, lawsuits, and political gridlock that we can no longer do the one thing that made us powerful in the first place. We built the modern world. Now we can't even fix a pothole without a permit, a protest, and a decade of delays. This isn't just a policy failure, it's a sign of rot. Civilizations that stop building don't plateau, they fall. Every empire collapses the same way. First, it stops rewarding excellence. Then it starts punishing it. And in 2025, America is deep into that second stage. We've created a system where competence is irrelevant, mediocrity is promoted, and failure is institutionalized. You see it in every corner of the country. Over 50% of U.S. public school students can't read or do math at grade level. And the response? Lower the standards. In Oregon, they literally eliminated basic graduation requirements to make the numbers look better. We're not fixing failure, we're redefining it. In the federal government, less than 1% of employees are ever fired for poor performance. It's nearly impossible to remove incompetence, even in critical agencies like the FAA, EPA, and Department of Defense. Meanwhile, in corporate America, shareholder value has taken a back seat to social signaling. Major airlines hold mandatory training on pronouns while canceling flights due to pilot shortages. Major banks focus more on ESG scores than balance sheets, while losing billions in bad bets. And don't even get started on our politics. Congress now has an average age of 59, the oldest in U.S. history. Half of them can't operate a smartphone, and we expect them to regulate AI and global supply chains. Our leadership is geriatric, unaccountable, and proudly out of touch. And when the public does try to vote for change, they're given two parties, both owned by lobbyists, both incapable of basic governance. The result? Half of Gen Z now believes democracy is not essential. Think about that. The generation raised in the most privileged country in human history no longer trusts the system to work, because it doesn't. Trains crash, banks collapse, blackouts spread, water systems fail, planes nearly collide, and every time the excuse is the same: unforeseen circumstances. No, it's foreseeable. It's inevitable when you stop rewarding competence and start running the country like a college group project. America became a superpower by empowering its best minds. Now we demonize them. Bureaucracy chokes innovation. Politics destroys merit. And mediocrity becomes the new standard. This is how empires fall, not from invasion, but from inside. From the quiet, systematic elimination of excellence. And once it's gone, you don't get it back. America is not becoming a two-tier society. It already is one. In fact, it's worse than most people realize. As of 2025, the top 10% of Americans own 89% of all U.S. stocks. The bottom 50%? They own none. Zero. They live paycheck to paycheck in a country that rewards capital over labor, connections over competence, and access over merit. And the divide is no longer just economic. It's institutionalized. If you're rich in America, you live in a different universe. You drink clean water, send your kids to safe schools, get real medicine, and receive actual legal protection. If you're poor, you get poisoned pipes in Flint, failing public schools in Baltimore, fentanyl in the ER, and cops that don't show up. The zip code you're born in now predicts your life expectancy more than your DNA. And the wealth gap? It's no longer just wide. It's a chasm. In 1989, the top 1% had 17 times the wealth of the bottom 50%. In 2023, 76 times. And thanks to asset inflation, Interest rate hikes and rising home prices, that number is still growing. But here's the part nobody talks about. This is by design. The Federal Reserve printed $6 trillion in 2 years. Where did it go? Not to Main Street, to Wall Street. Asset prices soared. Stocks, bonds, crypto, housing. If you owned assets, you got richer. If you didn't, you got crushed by inflation. And now the average American household needs $119,000 a year just to break even. The median income? $74,000. Do the math. The American dream has become a gated community. And once societies lock into this two-tier structure, where upward mobility is a fantasy and rules are selectively enforced, they don't go back. This is how oligarchies form. This is how revolutions start. Bread and circus for the poor, bailouts and bonuses for the elite. And when people realize the system isn't broken, it's rigged, they start checking out. That's why millions of young Americans have stopped working entirely. Why suicide is rising. Why faith in institutions is collapsing. They're not lazy. They're disillusioned. Because deep down they know the game is over. The class divide is permanent. The escalator is broken. And the exit sign is flashing red. A nation can survive war. It can survive recessions. It can survive corruption. But it cannot survive the collapse of trust. And right now, America is bleeding trust faster than it can fake polls or print headlines. In 1964, 77% of Americans said they trusted the federal government to do the right thing most of the time. In 2024, that number is 7%. That's not a dip. That's institutional collapse. It's not just government either. Trust in media is at 11%. The Supreme Court has its lowest approval rating ever, and less than 30% of Gen Z says they believe in capitalism as a system. The glue that once held this country together, shared stories, belief in the process, trust in institutions, is gone, evaporated. And nobody's fixing it because no one even agrees on what's real anymore. One half of the country believes elections are rigged. The other half thinks reality is whatever their preferred news anchor tells them. And here's the kicker. They're both right, in a way. Because whether it's censorship algorithms, coordinated media narratives, or closed-door lobbying, we are living through the gamification of democracy. Everything is a show. Nothing is neutral. You think that's sustainable? You think you can build an economy, run a military, or educate a population on a foundation of lies and confusion? No chance. Trust isn't just moral, it's infrastructure. Without it, nothing works. The courts don't function. The police don't protect. The markets don't stabilize. The elections don't matter. And the moment a crisis hits, a real one, not a social media panic, but a systemic shock like a currency crash or energy grid failure, that trust will not be there. You'll have 330 million people with 330 million different realities, no shared truth, and no unified response. That is the final stage before fragmentation. It's how civil wars start. It's how empires break, not at the borders, but in the minds of the people. And once the national identity shatters into tribes, no amount of GDP or firepower can hold it together. You're not a country anymore. You're a hostage situation with a flag. Trust is the currency of civilization, and we're bankrupt. If you want to understand why America keeps spiraling, stop looking for conspiracies. The truth is simpler, darker, and far more dangerous. We're addicted to crisis. Politically, economically, emotionally, we don't know how to function without chaos anymore. It's become our operating system. Look around. The media doesn't report news. It sells fear. Politicians don't solve problems. They manufacture enemies. Our entire economy is driven by panic, speculation, and bailout culture. A recession used to be a course correction. Now it's a mass extinction event unless the Fed steps in with $1 trillion stimulus binge. The stock market doesn't react to fundamentals anymore. It reacts to headlines. The minute Wall Street hears the word war, virus, or rate cut, algorithms go haywire. That's not capitalism. That's a casino run by arsonists who bet on the fire. And the public? We're no better. Every dopamine hit comes from doom scrolling. Outrage has replaced optimism. If there's no fresh scandal, we dig up an old one and pour gasoline on it. Social media didn't just polarize us. It rewired us. Now everything is a crisis, every day, forever. And when you live in that constant adrenaline loop, you can't do the boring but necessary work of building. You can't plan for 10 years from now when you're screaming about 10 minutes from now. You can't lead the world when you can't even lead a conversation. And guess what? This crisis addiction costs money, trillions. Just look at the last 20 years. The war on terror cost us $8 trillion. The COVID panic? Another $6 trillion. Financial bailouts since 2008? Over $29 trillion in liquidity injections and backstops. And we didn't solve any of it. We just papered over the cracks and told everyone to go back to sleep. But you can't do that forever. Because eventually, the panic becomes permanent. The debt becomes unpayable. And the population becomes too numb to care. And that's where we are now. A nation of twitchy algorithms, empty press conferences, broken institutions, and people who've been trained to expect disaster and then do nothing. This is what a dying empire looks like. A place that mistakes adrenaline for action, outrage for insight, and endless emergency for leadership. We don't manage crisis anymore. We mainline it, and we're overdosing in real time. The debt isn't a future problem. It's the problem. It's not on the horizon. It's in the rearview mirror, chasing us at 120 miles an hour while we argue about pronouns and TikTok bans. As of December 2025, the U.S. national debt has passed $36.7 trillion. That's over 120% of GDP. And worse, interest payments alone are now approaching $1.3 trillion per year. That means we're spending more to service the debt than on defense, education, or infrastructure. We are now borrowing money to pay interest on the money we already borrowed. That is not a strategy. That is the textbook definition of a debt spiral. And it's not slowing down, it's accelerating. The Congressional Budget Office projects the debt will hit $50 trillion by 2030, assuming nothing goes wrong. But things always go wrong. Recessions, wars, pandemics, natural disasters, you name it. One shock, just one, and the whole thing snaps. And the Fed? They're trapped. If they cut interest rates to ease the debt load, inflation explodes. If they raise rates to tame inflation, interest payments skyrocket. There is no soft landing. There is no lever left to pull. And here's what no politician will say out loud. The debt is now so large, the only ways out are default, devaluation, or disaster. Either we stop paying, hello, financial collapse, or we print the money and debase the dollar, hello, hyperinflation. Or we pray for 10% GDP growth every year for the next 20 years, which hasn't happened in modern history. We're not even paying down the interest, let alone the principal. This is like maxing out your credit card, taking out a second card to pay the first, and convincing yourself you're managing your finances because the lights are still on. But eventually, the bill comes due. And here's the sick twist. Entitlements alone, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, will consume 100% of tax revenue by 2033. That means everything else, including the military, will have to be funded through more debt. It's arithmetic, not politics. The empire is running on fumes, denial, and IOUs. There is no more fiscal runway. There is only the cliff. And we're already mid-air. You think collapse means fire in the streets? Tanks rolling through Washington? Dollar bills blowing through an empty Walmart parking lot? No. That's not how it happens. That's how it ends. Collapse doesn't announce itself. It creeps, quiet, uneventful, bureaucratic. Your passport still works. The lights still flicker on. You still buy coffee at the corner store. But the cracks are everywhere, and they're getting wider. Planes start crashing more often, not because of war, but because of maintenance delays and air traffic control failures. Doctors leave the profession, and hospitals quietly cut back on services. Your prescription costs double. Your 911 call takes 25 minutes. The roads go unrepaired. The subway breaks down. Public school teachers quit en masse. Trash collection gets spotty. Grocery shelves get thinner. Little things, manageable things, until they aren't. Until there's a bank run in the Midwest. Until a bond auction fails. Until an election result is disputed and half the country refuses to recognize it. Until one domino tips and 10 more follow. That's how collapse happens. Not with a bang, but with a shrug. And the most dangerous part? Everyone insists it's fine until 5 seconds before it isn't. That's what happened in Lebanon, in Argentina, in the Soviet Union. They didn't think they were collapsing either. They thought they were adapting, restructuring, modernizing. The signs were obvious, but only in hindsight. And here's what the signs look like in America. Record suicides, record bankruptcies, record corporate defaults. 61% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 Gen Z adults living with parents. Over 100,000 drug overdose deaths annually. We are the richest country in the history of the world, and our people are dying younger, sadder, and poorer than their grandparents. That's not a recession. That's a civilizational unraveling. And no one in charge is reversing course. They're doubling down. More debt, more distraction, more denial. Every single stage of collapse is already here. We're just pretending it isn't. Like Rome, like Britain, like every empire that thought it was eternal, we believe we are the exception. But we're not. Because collapse isn't loud. It's quiet. It's a whisper you ignore until the lights go out, and no one comes to turn them back on. 3 superpowers thought they were invincible: Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. All of them followed the same pattern. All of them collapsed. And now it's us. The empire is cracking. The dollar is weakening. The systems are failing. And yet, everyone pretends it's normal. It's not. This isn't the trailer. This is the movie. And the ending? It's already written. If you want to understand exactly how it ends and how to survive what's coming, subscribe now. Because when the dollar falls, the lights go out, and the headlines change overnight, you'll want to be the one who saw it coming.